Well, okay, so this is it. We are on, and I am going to be talking to my friend and colleague, Ian Svenonius, about his book, The Psychic Soviet, which has just enjoyed a deluxe reprint and reissuing via the wonderful Akashic Books, which is a wonderful imprint from Johnny Temple, who is also a friend of ours.
From New York,
And what's that?
New York City.
I'm calling you, and I'm in New York City. Ian's
Well,
in Los Angeles.
he's also from New York City, right?
Oh, and Johnny is also, yes, and Akashic is a very New York City imprint, I would say.
New York.
Um, so I guess, well, where to start? I guess I want to start with talking about you, Ian, as a rock and roll singer and as a personality who does, as long as I've been following your music, I think you do one of the best jobs of being a rock and roll singer.
Okay.
And by that, I mean that you, to me, have always been, and this is important, a a what's the word? A friendly voice, in spite of being almost alarmingly cool and possibly scary. There's always been, and I think that this is the job of a rock singer, is to be a friendly voice, is to let you in, it's to let the listener, let the person who's watching you into the room. And I can only give my example of the first time that I saw you play, which was with Nation of Ulysses at a venue called, I think, God, what was it called? The Space at Chase?
Oh, wow.
Remember the Space at Chase?
The space, or was it the spiral or something? Who was it with?
No, it was on one of the avenues in the East Village.
Yeah, the space at Chase.
Maybe that was it. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. It was a weird. It was not a usual venue, and there weren't a hell of a lot of people there. And I went because I was a fan of the record. And you set your shoes on fire and played a dynamite set. The entire band, all of your clothes were destroyed by the end of the set because you were dancing so hard and you were wearing these tight suits. And it was one of the best shows that I've ever seen. And I was utterly blown away and kind of terrified, and all the feelings, challenged and scared and like, can I handle this? And then you were walking out of the club, and I just said, "Hey, man, great show!" And you immediately stopped. You stopped your roll. Shook my hand, and said, "Oh, hey, man, thanks a lot." And you were immediately engaging, and that to me is sort of the essence of what you do and what you continue to do. And in many ways, I feel like this book is almost like a portable version of that, in that it's called The Psychic Soviet. It presents, even by its own, by the way that it looks, it presents a challenge. By its title, it presents a challenge, and yet it is so friendly and so useful and so positive. And so that's sort of that I'm going to start there. And forgive me if what I've said is off the mark, in terms of what your intentions are, as far as you being a rock and roll singer and a friendly voice. All right, Ian, back to you.
Oh, well, hey, number one, Matt, thank you very much. By the way, it's a great honor to have Matt Sweeney as the interrogator tonight in this series of conversations, discussions about the reissue of the historic, talked about bestseller, Smash Underground, page turner, Psychic Soviet. Matt is my favorite musician and an incredible interviewer, actually, and he's interviewed a lot of luminaries in his TV show, um, uh, Guitar Moves, which is it's a master class in the form of chit chat and interlocution. So thank you very much, Matt. It's really a pleasure and an honor, and I really appreciate you coming into the internet, because I know this is a very vulnerable space for all of us. Nobody knows what's up, what's down. Nobody knows who's who. There's whole, I mean, it could, anybody can, we're, it's kind of a little in a barrel here. So I really appreciate you coming and being part of it. It's really,
Yeah,
so I appreciate it. And I also appreciate your assessment of the role of the rocker as being somebody who's a friendly voice. In fact, I would go one further and to say that a proper rock and roller is almost like a clown. They almost inhabit a clown role. They're kind of, they can be a straw man or whatever, they can be, they're held up to ridicule, but they kind of help liberate.
I concur with that, and I feel like you may have written, I don't, or maybe it's something that we've talked about before, which is the role of rock and roller as clown, and the inherent vulnerability that is, that comes with that mantle,
Yeah.
so but the idea of a certain kind of friendly vulnerability, and yet there has to also be a threat, there, or a threat to a threat. Okay, how about this? A rock and roller, if he's doing his job, a rock and roll singer is absolutely attacking your reality, is destroying your myths, is exposing your magical thinking for what it is, which is another thing that I think you are wonderful at.
Okay.
And with that, maybe we could talk a little bit about the Psychic Soviet and the way that you sort of do. To me, it does go beyond demythologizing things. It basically, I find a lot of myths are discussed in this book, and a lot of myths are shown in a very, very fun way, or just sort of laid bare, but also that kind of magical thinking that every music fan and rock and roll fan has. I think this book speaks to that, and a lot of your writing does. And by magical thinking, I mean like an almost religious belief in the power of music, and also magical thinking, and the belief that things are the way that they are because everything's cool, and the way that we live is okay, and just certain, like that the food that we eat means one thing when maybe it means another thing. Like I think that you are really wonderful at a full frontal assault on what we're used to as an accepted reality. And when I'm saying we, I'm gonna just say this is like, I guess I'm going to be speaking for the music fan, the people who know who you are when I'm using this terminology. What the we is the music fan. So to that end, and I'm sorry if I went on for too long, who do you see this book as being for, and where do you want it to land, and what? We'll start there.
So, well, I would say that the book changes day to day, depending on what's happening, what context it exists in. So, for example, the Psychic Soviet, when it was initially released, was released into a different context. It was released in a context of ultimate American triumphalism, the kind of singular superpower and all the self-congratulatory rhetoric about the victory in the Cold War, and it was written with an America that was eyeing further conquests. It had no competitor to invasion of Iraq and blah blah blah, everything. And the Soviet Soviet was great for the era that it initially appeared in the last decade. But when this new epoch presented itself with its new uh, uh, facts on the ground, then I went to Johnny Temple and I said, I think it's really important for the Psychic Soviet to be reissued because I think it has a whole new story to tell. And that's why we rushed it into production just in the last few months. And it's hit the streets and it's really catching fire because right now the Psychic Soviet, it's almost as if it's a different book from the when it initially appeared. It's just as relevant and resonant, and maybe even more so, because one the initial essay in the Psychic Soviet is about the Cold War and the collapse of Russia as the competitor to America, and a kind of
Ian, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I had a couple requests. If you could turn your mic up just a little bit, that would be really great.
yeah. Okay, hold on. That
Blast us, Ian.
Hold on, I'm getting some feedback though, because really, I really hate the way Zoom sounds. So I put this mic through this amp. So,
Oh, that sounds good.
I wanted the voice to have a little tremolo on it, but
That sounds great.
it seems like it's not quite
That's good.
Okay, cool.
That sounds good.
Okay, so basically, yeah, anyway, the Circuit Soviet, it's just existing in a new context, and it's more resonant, more relevant than ever before. Because, as you know, there's a new rhetoric about the resurgent power of the Russian villain. And this is actually kind of very, pertinent to the first chapter of the Psychic Soviet. It's the first chapter. I think it's called Psychic Soviet. Anyway, and it's talking about the psychosexual relationship between the USA and the Soviet Union. And once the Soviet Union was vanquished by a combination of, the arms race and financing the Afghan rebellion, or the Afghan war against the Soviets, and maybe kind of rigging the Chernobyl explosion. There's a lot of different things that brought about the demise of the socialist experiment, the USSR. And at first it felt really good. The USA was flexing muscles and raking in the cash, from newly acquired resources and breaking up the enemy's land holdings. But ultimately, wound in the DNA of the military-industrial complex is the need for the Soviet enemy. So now, with American power kind of being questioned because of this pandemic, for example, and because of this libertarian president, there's a real desire for a return of an archvillain who who can embody all our fears and hatreds and distrust, and so there's a real need for this creature to exist, and so we're reconstituting it, and we've been reconstituting it, and it's a narrative that's really present in the news media and everything, because there's ultimately we're just these kind of spectators to a cosmic struggle between different factions of a ruling class. There's the kind of libertarians who just want to create a kind of Zardoz post-apocalyptic landscape. They want to take away our post office, and they're typified by the current president. And then there's these kind of old-fashioned control the earth kind of imperialists, who are typified by the competing party. And all of us. Then there's people like us who have been denied an education, and so all we have are our emotions, and so we just have our emotions, and our emotions are constantly being manipulated, and we're just constantly undergoing a kind of cathartic, these different, episodes of feeling, and we're really unable to get past our feelings and really see, the bigger picture. So this book is the only book that really shows the real picture, the whole picture. In the words of Bob Dylan, a tramp vomiting in the street next to a picture of Nelson Rockefeller. The big picture. Can you guys hear me okay now? Is that better?
That is fantastic. There are just so many great things to read in this book, and I thought that maybe I would just pull up some random, no, well, not quite random, but I'm just going to go through and look at things that I highlighted. And one thing that really fascinated me is in an essay called "The Bloody Latte." This is a good example of the way, Ian, you are able to kind of make a really compelling argument that that I've never thought of, that ties so many things together. And this is about popular drinks in various cultures. So you write rather, drink is substantiation a la the Catholic cannibalism of Christ's blood and body. The smell of coffee is the odor of the Sandinista hospital, bodies maimed by contra bombs. Ice-cold vodka is the blood of Russians, raped and murdered by capitalism. And so it has been through history. Each imperial culture imports a liquid memento from their vanquished foe to serve as a totem of their power and glory. Tea, the Englishman's beverage, is falling out of favor as their neo-colonial hold on the subcontinent wavers. For 2 centuries, the English supped on their well-steeped leaves and tasted the sweat of the slaves in the empire. Now tea is for old mums, while beer-swilling lads form the visible majority. The Brits love their beer. A cold pint brings fond memories of dead Germans falling out of the sky in the Battle of Britain. Beer first attained great popularity in America immediately after the First World War, when the US had tipped the scale against the Kaiser in the last days of the conflict. That war had been highly unpopular to a then isolationist nation, with American involvement cynically contrived by Anglophiles in government. The war transformed the country profoundly, much to the consternation of activists. So this idea, and it goes on.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Coke was provided to all American soldiers during the Second World War as a way to blood, in quotes, the army. Coke plants in Germany changed their trade name to Fanta so as to deflect charges of corporate two-timing in the war effort. Fanta was orange, a flavor homage to the smashed Republican Army in Spain, where the German army had first honed their killing skills. When a German drank an orange pop, he was gnawing at the jugular of an anarcho-syndicalist in Valencia. Sorry, I'll say it again. When a German drank an orange pop, he was gnawing at the jugular of an anarcho-syndicalist in Valencia. That is just such a great line. And God, where to begin with that? Let's just, I'm going to pull back and say, even before we talk about food, describe what anarcho-syndicalism is.
Oh, well, when Republican Spain was happening and Franco, invaded, Franco was a Spanish general, and he was, he took the Foreign Legion, the Spanish Foreign Legion soldiers, and the kind of, the loyalists, and they invaded the country to crush the Republic, the Spanish Republic. Well, all the trade unions, had been these kind of hyper-political, they were political affiliated, unions that were armed. So they all became their own armies. This is how I understand it. I'm not a historian, but anyway, so the armies were kind of affiliated with these unions, and they all were armed, and so the big ones, the CNT and the UGT, were anarchist, and they were in, I think they were mostly in Valencia, Catalonia. I think it was kind of eastern part of Spain that was more left, and of course the Soviet Union was the only country that supported the republic. And Orwell wrote a famous book called Homage to Catalonia, where he talks about fighting for the anarchists, and he really puts down the communists and the Soviet Union. He says that they were the bad guys. And, Orwell, I love the guy, but, come on, this is this kind of divide and conquer thing that we're all looking at right now, where the CIA and the FBI are using kind of COINTELPRO tactics to get everybody to hate each other, so that we don't talk about the rent, or the phone companies are bilking us for $100 a month still, even though everybody's unemployed, or the insurance companies, the auto insurance companies. Now, the landlords, we have to take the gains that we've gotten from our organization in the street. We've got to take the focus and put it on the landowners, the Silicon Valley tech overlords who have made hundreds of billions of dollars since we've been in this enforced prison state. And we've got to have a rent strike, people. That's the next step. We've got to have a rent strike, and none of this backbiting can continue, and none of this, this kind of cannibalistic. Look at Orwell. He wrote a book where he's putting down the communists, and you know what? The Republic lost. They lost. They had, we've got to get together. We've got to come together. Our common cause, working people, smash the libertarian billionaire.
I think you also just did a good job of talking about who you want this book to appeal to, and where you want this book to land. Is it working people? It's for working people. Is it for people who write? Is it for people who make music? Is it for people who want to do bands? Who is this book for?
It's really for all those people. I mean, the main thing is that we, now that sports are canceled, and the university system is about to collapse, this right now it looks like a world designed by Silicon Valley, because it's just people in their homes ordering from Amazon. But we can use these games to create a utopia. That's right, a utopia, and eat a superiority burger.
Do you see this time as a clutch time where there is where finally we do have a window to make things better?
I mean, right now the main thing is that we have to address the rent. When we get out of this thing, if we ever do, there's not going to be any clubs. There's not going to be any theaters. None of the things that we like or love are going to exist because of something called landlords. And we've got to do something to, we've got to address that instead of infighting and self-flagellating.
Exactly. Right. I very, very, very well said. I want to talk a little bit. I'm going to keep on talking about this food thing because I love this chapter so much. And food has always kind of been a thing with you, I feel like, and society's relationship to what we put in our bodies and what it means on a kind of emotional identity, on an identity level, I suppose. And what I read speaks to that, but also maybe on a person, maybe just briefly, You mentioned Superiority Burger, which is a restaurant that we both love. Our friend Brooks Headley makes that restaurant, and that is a good restaurant. Maybe can we talk a little bit about your relationship with, say, why do you like Superiority Burger, and then let's say compare it to your relationship with candy bars.
Well, that's an interesting, this is interesting because Superiority Burger, okay, the Psychic Soviet, basically the proposition of the Psychic Soviet is to say, like it's essentially, it's inspired by a kind of Soviet critique of American consumer culture. So
Okay.
when I was young, I remember reading some kind of criticism that from the Soviet Union about, Prince's 1999 song, and it was saying, oh, what a nihilistic song about celebrating the end of the world or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, that's great. And from now on, that's going to be I'm always going to take that perspective into account, because I am a Gemini, and I think the Gemini is always looking for the twin. And by that, I mean, we have a talent for empathy. We can empathize. And that's why people think of the Gemini as a contrarian, but it's actually called empathy. So the Soviet Union became, a sort of, unfortunately, the Soviet Union collapsed and disintegrated, or I would have been a defector. I would have defected, because I always thought, well, Baryshnikov defected to America, and he got all this, he was celebrated. Oh, the greatest ballet dancer is defected because our system is so much better. But if I defected, people would have said, he's the greatest rock and roll star from America. And now he's here, he's ours, because our system is superior. So, because Americans don't know anything about Baryshnikov, about ballet. They really don't. It's not our thing, I know about ballet, you know about ballet, but typical American just says, oh, Baryshnikov, they're the greatest ballet dancer. Yeah. But we know that he was probably like maybe third tier in the Soviet Union. He's probably like, he's anyway.
He was really hot. He was really good looking.
He was.
That's
Russian ballet dancer isn't hot. I mean, they're probably.
Yeah, I know, right? That's true. Yeah. But I mean, that to me was his appeal to the American thing, was like, this guy's hot.
Exactly. Well, anyway, but one thing that's interesting about the Soviet Union is that their mission was to make ballet and the high arts, the high culture, what in our country is called high culture. They were trying to bring that to the people. So they were kind of, doing classical, Shostakovich or whatever, but it was going to be for the people. So ballet, opera, taking high art and bringing it to the people. Now, the capitalist response was very canny. It was take trash and bring it all the way up. So Andy Warhol, pop art, things like that. Pop art is essentially just the crassest commercialism and, comic books or whatever. And then all of a sudden it's elevated to the top level. So these were the two movements. The Soviet Union was going, trying to bring the stuff on top down, and then Americans brought the stuff on the bottom up. And obviously we love Warhol, we love Lichtenstein, we love Jack Kirby. But it's an interesting thing. And I would say that Brooks at Superiority Burger is kind of doing the Soviet thing, because he's taking hot cuisine and he's presenting it for $5. When you go to Superiority Burger, you get something that's much better than, what, some, West Village restaurant is serving, but you're getting it for, a tenth of the price. So that's why Superiority Burger is really interesting to me, because it's essentially the Soviet model, which is bringing art into the lives of everyone, bringing art into the lives of the common people, instead of celebrating garbage and, bringing it up, and that's a good example, because Brooks is taking hot cuisine, bringing it to the poorest people, poorest strata. And on the capitalist side, you have Bill Clinton eating at McDonald's. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's why we were supposed to like Bill Clinton. Well, he eats McDonald's. He's a good guy.
For some reason, this makes me think of in Cuba. I talked to a really great guitar player on the street, and we struck up a friendship, and we had some good conversations over a few days. And I asked him, once we were comfortable with each other, what's the first negative thing that came to his mind in his education about America? Meaning, I think I asked him, what bad stuff did teachers tell you about America? And without hesitation, he goes, oh, I mean, they said that Americans are taught to follow their dreams. And it was so cool. I was like, I had never thought about how the idea of like, yeah, you should follow your dreams. That's what you should do. What a shitty thing, you know, like if you just look at it a slightly different way, that's like the most irresponsible, you know, narcissistic, you know, like, oh really? So the most important thing is to follow your fucking dreams, whatever your dreams may be. That's what you're supposed to do. Not look out for your family.
That's
not look out for, you know, I think it really stuck in my head. And in some ways, again, going back to what I think is cool about this book is that it kind of, it has this loving waking up. It just kind of wakes you up to maybe this selfish dream that I was in, you know what I mean? Like a selfish dream of, yeah, you know, what I want is good and what I like is good. And, you know, and not really thinking about what's going on behind that. And ultimately, I guess Americans and rock and roll sort of drive towards pleasure and, you know, what I want, you know, getting what you want. So,
yeah. That's incredible. Well, you know, going to Cuba is a real lesson in the art in the life of the people, because there's music everywhere. Everybody's playing music, and
right.
There's different kinds of music that coexist, and it really is extraordinary. You know, it's an extraordinary place from a musical standpoint. In fact, we have a common friend who tried to get my old group to go to Cuba. And at the
Bob
time,
Ariano.
yeah, great guy, and great. And I regret not pursuing it, but at the time I felt like, well, Cubans have a lot of music. They don't really need my music, and I don't want to be an exponent of capitalism, or do you know what I mean? Like, I think that when we go to a country and we see the footprint of our, you know, our export. Like when you see Starbucks in Italy, or, you know, or whatever, it's not what you want to see. Like, at the risk of sounding, you know, like nationalist, or, you know, something, or you know, it's, you know, that's, I don't always love, you know, seeing cultural, you know, exports like that. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So if you feel like you're sort of, oh well, well, this is a good thing to do for me personally, like I want to do that, but at the same time, well, what message is it sending on a macro scale, you know?
I concur with that. Like maybe like in Cuba, what was sad actually was by the time that I got there wasn't music on the street. In fact, the reason that I talked to this guitar player guy was he was the first fucking guy I saw playing guitar on the street after I'd been walking through Havana for like a day. There, I could, you know what I mean? I was expecting to see all this action. There wasn't. And weirdly, what I could tell in the markets, what they're selling was Puff Daddy stuff. Literally, like in the markets, there's a lot of bootleg Puff Daddy stuff. And generally, when I talk to people, they go, "Oh, you're from New York? Wow, what's up with rap?" They were totally interested in our kind of, you know, Puff Daddy stuff. So that was wild. As opposed to, let's say, my experience in Morocco, which is maybe which is touching on what you're talking about. And when I got there, nobody gave a fuck about Western culture at all. They didn't care. And it was so nice. It felt so good. Music was everywhere, you know, and there was so much stuff to check out. And it was as if the West never, it was as if America never existed. But, you know, obviously it's different trips are happen to different people. That just happened in the week that I was there to be what was going on. I didn't hear a single Western song, you know what I mean? And it was so nice and it was great, you know, and I was bumbling around doing tourist shit, you know?
You know, I was in, yeah, that's interesting. Wow, that's great.
Yeah. Morocco, dude.
Yeah, Morocco. When I was in, I went to Morocco, and when I was at the airport, they said, "You know Noam Chomsky."
They said that to you? Because they had info?
Said that. They said, "You know Noam Chomsky."
Where were they coming from by saying that?
It was very confusing. There was a little bit of I said, well, I'm aware of this linguist who's Noam Chomsky. It was weird.
Interesting. And this was at the passport stamping?
No, right there. No, I was in the, yeah, exactly. Yeah, security.
So wild.
Yeah.
So again, this book goes to so many places, but I want to, you know, and you and I are friendly, and we're talking about, I guess, some big ideas in history and stuff. So I want to keep in mind that you know, we ideally have some younger viewers, and maybe right now, before I do a couple of readings from the book, real quick, other than this book, what are, say, 3 books that you would recommend to a beloved younger cousin, or somebody that you just want to see do okay in the world, and somebody who you want to open their eyes? What are just 3 just slam banging classics that they could buy from Quimby Books, let's say, Quimby's book?
Quimby's in Chicago.
Yes.
Oh, Quimby's is the host of this talk.
Mm-hmm.
Is selling The Psychic Soviet, which is the book that Matt Sweeney and I are discussing this afternoon. So log on to Quimby's and maybe a fun pack with Psychic Soviet, and perhaps one of the books that I'm about to name, which would be
the best books.
The best books.
Just a couple of great ones.
Golly, I don't know. You start. What's a book that you like?
Okay, I remember when I read Journey to the End of the Night, I was like, God damn it! I wish that I read this when I was 18, by Celine.
Yeah.
So I think that's one that I would, that's kind of a, you know, just like anybody who's young and who's looking out at the world and ready to dive in. That's a pretty strong one. I love that book.
That's a good book. I like that book too.
That's a good one for your toolkit, as they would say in corporate speak. You know, or just something that if you ingest that book, you're better off. You know.
And Quimby said they can special order Journey. Celine's
great.
Anyway, what about the Cool? Have you read The Cool World? Because you're a New Yorker. The Cool World.
No, is that Glenn O'Brien?
No, it's who wrote The Cool World? Quimby's. Who wrote Cool World? It was made into a film by Shirley Clark.
I will find out for you momentarily.
Shirley Clark, the same one who did that incredible Junkie Jazz movie?
Yeah, and also
The Connection.
Ornette Coleman.
Oh yeah, that one's beautiful too.
Made in America or Made in USA.
The Houston.
Guy who wrote Cool World. Somebody Warren somebody or some Warren Miller. Warren Miller. That's who it is. Warren.
That's one to get. Cool World.
Well, you would love it because it's about New York and gangs and stuff like that. In fact, speaking of New York books, have you ever read that
Warren Miller?
Have you ever read that book called Mondo Manhattan?
Mondo Manhattan.
Oh,
you read Mondo Manhattan?
It's called Terrible Honesty. Ooh. Terrible Honesty, and it's about the 20s in New York City, and it's about jazz.
Terrible Honesty. That's
it's
about go ahead.
And it's by this woman who was a professor.
Woman writer.
Or something like that. I don't know, some intellectual academic type person. Great book. It's all about basically, oh yeah, you can't win. That's a good book.
Oh yeah, that's a great one. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another one I recommend to kids. You
But
Can't Win by Jack Black.
as a New York person, I think you should read this book. It's called Quimby. Who wrote that book? Terrible Honesty. It's about New York.
Terrible Honesty.
It's about
That's so good.
jazz
And
yeah.
Douglas.
and
And Douglas.
Oh, she's great. And Douglas, yeah, great.
Oh,
book.
okay. If we're gonna keep on talking about that, have you read Herbert Huncke's book, Guilty of Everything? His autobiography.
No, I've always wanted to read this book.
Oh my God. Herbert Huncke's. Is it Hubert or Herbert? Yeah, Herbert Huncke's Guilty of Everything is like run out and get it. He's such a wonderful storyteller. And there's an honesty to it that's rare. And also remember, keep in mind that Huncke was the guy who turned on all the beats.
Yeah.
He turned on everybody, not only to dope, but also to being a storyteller, to basically being cool, you know. And it has him coming up in Chicago as a criminally minded youth in Chicago in the 30s, and just that alone will blow your mind. His writing about what Chicago was like is terrifying and wild. So that's highly recommended. And then my favorite New York book, I would say, as long as we're throwing books, and this is another one. Again, this is for like young people to like. This is you're gonna fucking draw on this. You know, is Up in the Old Hotel by Joseph Mitchell. He was a writer for the New Yorker magazine, and he just wrote profiles on real New Yorkers, and his sweet spot was like 40s, 50s, and it's so wonderful. It's just great. It's a great New York book.
Cool.
But I want to jump back also just as far as like where your head's at, and where, if you're going to buy this book, The Psychic Soviet, what's another really valuable book for the young artistically inclined or politically inclined, or just somebody who wants to engage in life?
Yeah.
When you wrote this book and you were so proud, and when you had this in your hand, you were like, wow, I just did a book as good as.
While Ian is taking a second to think, I just want to weigh in really quick. First of all, Zoom just alerted us that we get more than 40 minutes. So party! Next, I know. Right. Next, a few people asked if you guys are going to do a Q&A and have submitted some questions to me. So we don't have to do that right away, but I just wanted to see if you guys wanted to do that, because if you do, then I will accept questions from people.
Wow.
I'm game. Yes, I will. I will be the decider of the questions of what questions that I will ask Ian. But I would love to hear, and that was a George Bush reference. Yes, I would like to know what those questions are.
Okay.
And also you can feel free to use your discretion. If you see some that look good to you, just let me know what they are.
Okay. All right. Do you want me to? I can just post them in the chat.
Sure.
Or people are posting them in the chat, so I will.
Oh, they are. See, I'm trying to focus on Ian, and I'm not looking at the chat as much because I can't do
so many distractions.
Yeah,
I know.
So here's what I think you do. Here's my suggestion.
Okay.
You guys keep talking.
Okay.
I'll get some questions down, and then when you guys are ready, let me know, and I'll throw some out at you, and you can decide whether you want to answer them or not. Sound good? Great.
Totally good. Sounds good to me. Ian,
I'm gonna go back.
With that?
Yeah, that's great.
Great. All right, I'm gonna mute myself.
So one of my favorite books is the Louis Buñuel autobiography, My Last Sigh, and you could get that at Quimby's.
Louis Buñuel's.
In fact, any book that Matt or I mention is going to be 70% off on the Quimby's book site.
I thought it was 90%.
And you guys will be paying that 70% your book sales. Okay, great. Thanks.
Crazy days at Quimby's. Prices are slashed. We've gone crazy. Take advantage.
Right now, it's a fire sale at Quimby's. I'm going to get into some other readings. I'm going to jump around now. Not like House of Pain, but like this. I'm going to read, actually, I think I'm going to have, JR, would you be up for reading something? Okay. You know what? Guess what, Ian? I got a special surprise.
Oh my goodness. JR. Let's have a round of applause from cyberspace.
Yeah, here. Yeah, here. Put these in your ear.
Okay.
1 second.
You know, dramatic reading from the Psychic Soviet.
All right.
All right.
This is an excerpt, The DJ. With American industry exported to impoverished slave states, Mexico, Taiwan, etc., musicians no longer mirror their masters. The ruling class in the US no longer produces, but merely moves money through stocks and speculation. They are the designators of worth. The DJ is their star. A preposterous poser, once an adjunct to wedding parties, he is now exalted, featured in advertisements, and lavished with wealth and fame. He has become ubiquitous. No event is complete without one of these ninjas spinning their records. Like the rulers on Wall Street, he has no actual talent except to play with other people's labor. His talent in his impeccable taste and his ability to turn junk into gold, like his stockbroking masters. His scratching of records is his display of contempt for the labor of his subjects. The exaltation of the DJ is the ruling class congratulating itself for its good judgment in being born wealthy and in control of the world economy.
So
it's good. It's strong.
How good is that?
Thank you very much.
We're swapping out
Thank
here.
you, JR. It was fantastic. Just so you guys know, I am a disc jockey. This is what's called in communism auto-criticism, or a kind of reflexive, sort of, self-pillorying. But anyway, have you read Peter Coyote's book? He was part of the San Francisco mime troupe. And then a Roman Polanski film. That's pretty interesting.
Oh, yeah, he was in The Diggers. The Diggers, right?
Yeah, he's a digger. And he was a mime troupe guy. Oh, that's a good book. Emmett Grogan's book, Ringo Levio. Have you read that?
The Ringo Love You?
Ringo Levio. Ringo Levio. See,
Ringo. Is it about Ringo?
It's about, it's by Emmett Grogan, who is the king of the Diggers. The Digger.
Oh, okay.
But he started as a street savvy New York youth. So you should read that as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
New York is the center of the universe anymore now, because obviously it's shifted over to Bucharest or something, right?
I hear that where it's at is oh my God, what's the city? What's the southernmost city in Italy where all the crime happens and it's all crazy?
Naples.
Yes. Apparently Naples is where it's at, Ian. That's what I hear. I hear it's popping. I hear it's popping.
Naples. I think.
Seriously, yes, I hear that that's like where the risk takers are and the artists and all the freaks and like that. It's fabulous and cheap at the moment.
Well, yeah, can't tell everybody on the internet.
Yeah. Something we were talking about earlier is what's going to happen to artistic types and performer types like ourselves in America, because since it looks like no one cares about our clubs, no one cares about our performers, except for obviously like giant, kind of gross stars. So it looks like we're going to have to go to Europe, I guess, right? To be appreciated as American artists. Does that seem like the future?
Only there was a place we could defect to as political refugees and then, and held up as exponents of that system.
Yes.
Good, better judgment or better system. Now, the only real places you can do that now would be Cuba, Iran, or North Korea. So because the Eastern Bloc has been, it's been infiltrated and turned into another capitalist shithole, we have to go to the only country I mean, in Iran every day they burn the American flag and they say they chant "Death to America." So if you went there as American guitarist Matt Sweeney and asked for political refuge, I think it might work, and you might be, you might be able to find employment. But I think that's really the only.
And you know the problem with
because,
the only thing is that the only problem with going to a place like Iran is that musically there's so much more advanced than like I'm a garbage musician by their standards. You know what I mean? Like it's like I could barely play by if you start to listen to Arabic pop music, you're oh my god, like that's real music. What I do is like is a sketchy kind of broken down folky rocky thing that they would be like, well, why does he play so poorly?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because that's another aspect of the psychic Soviet that I think could be explored, which is that in essence, the rock and roll scene, it's obviously it really comes out of folk, and by folk I mean the celebration of American poor people's music as a tool, like as just the the kind of the tradition of poor people's expression, resistance culture, blah blah blah. Folk music. So folk music people like Alan Lomax and the guy from who's the other guy, his competitor.
Harry Smith.
Well, him too, and also.
Well, no, Harry Smith is more of a collector.
It was another label that But anyway, the point is, these guys, or the people who were doing the folk scene, they were tending to this tradition of music, a very like minimalist music that included the blues and work songs and Woody Guthrie and all that kind of stuff, and they kind of they tended to that music, and eventually that music was turned into capitalist product that we call rock and roll music, right? So essentially it was, but that's one aspect of rock and roll is it's very minimal. It's a minimalist art form. So you're right, it can kind of only exist in in a kind of post-industrial economy like ours, where we're kind of looking at where we're kind of archaeologizing like things like nature and past expression. And you're right, Iran doesn't really fit. It doesn't really fit into that.
It's just I'm not good enough. Yeah. Gosh, that.
I think cool. I think we're good.
Yeah, you think we're good?
We don't have to talk forever. Just Zoom.
Yeah, do you guys want to take some questions?
I'm sick of making.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so we have 5 questions. Do you want me to just throw you the first one, and you guys can talk whether you want to?
Sure.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so Dan Rogers asks, who are the main theoretical influences, political or otherwise, on these essays? There's obviously Marxian and Jungian influence, but I was curious about others. Thanks.
Oh, well,
I approve of that question, Ian. You could answer it.
Oh, yeah, no, I appreciate it. And, so what's the main political, I mean, I don't know, I'm just a person who, I have very little education, very little sophistication. I've barely been granted any humanity. I went through the public school system in America. I'm not some French bureaucratician. And, once I would have felt ashamed to admit that, but now, I've come to terms with it through a lot of therapy, self-reflection, and auto-criticism. And I would just say, rock and roll really informed all these essays. And, because Paul Weller called punk, the new art school. Said it's the new art school. It's and art school, what it does, what art school's role is to help you look at things in another way. So really, that's all these essays are. It's just a way of looking at things in another way. And but you know, my heroes are, you know, Fidel Castro and people like that. Just, you know, the decolonizing movement, like Ho Chi Minh, Fidel Castro, people like that. So you know, the decolonists, you know, informed. You know, you know, Fidel Castro. He's a kind of, if you read his writings, he's very eloquent. You know, a real thinker. He was like a thinker, almost like Socrates. Anyway,
that's good. All right, 4 more to go. Good answer. We're ready for another one. In the meantime, yes.
Yeah. So so we've had a few more since then. So I'll try to zoom through them.
Cool.
All right. Thank you. I'll just see myself out. All right.
Think about these Silicon Valley technocrats. Think of how much money they're making from our confinement. It's, you know, Silicon Valley, we've got to address them instead of cannibal one another. We've got to address these people. What are they going to give back to us now that we've made them into billionaires? What are they going to give back? Do they obviously have no conscience. They have no, you know, like, humanity if they're just going to take all of our money and exploit our confinement and our mass incarceration, and they're just going to go to New Zealand and buy a ranch. Anyway, sorry, what's the question?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, Kurt T. Prutzman, by the way, I'm sorry, anybody, if I'm mispronouncing your names, says, Ian recently released several of his books in audiobooks form. Can he talk about his experience recording those, especially compared to recording music?
Ooh, good question.
That's a good question. Good question. Well, listen, I'm just going to talk to you. Just don't tell anybody what we're talking about. Listen, audiobooks, it's a dirty business. It's a really dirty business. It's like a real chop shop. They put you in this little booth. You feel like you're in a cryogenic chamber being vaulted to Mars, and they just have you reading for 7 hours a day, and it's very artless. And I really tried my damnedest to do a good job to bring the message to people like you and any other interested listener, because I know that there's a lot of long and lonely nights on the interstate where you want to hear something besides some garbage like Johnny Depp reading Keith Richards' shitty autobiography. But you, unfortunately, it was pretty tough, but I hope I did a good job. It was very difficult, I would say. Oh, let's turn it off. Okay.
Brooks, I wasn't aware of the audiobooks, and Brooks was saying that they're great, by the way.
Oh, thanks, Brooks. Brooks is, he's exactly the kind of person who I would think of as a potential listener, because he works insane hours. He's working, and he doesn't have, you know, his hands are, he's usually marinating a yam or something like this, with some arcane process. It takes like 16 hours, and it requires his attention the entire time. So he needs something like an audiobook to get him through that, or not to get him through it, because I think he loves it, but, you know, it would definitely be interesting. And so I was thinking of people like him when I agreed to do the audiobooks. Of course, I always had a different idea of the audiobooks, that they would have a bongo beat and a flamenco guitar, but, you know, people apparently, you know, the powers that be said that people want just a straight audio.
I had an idea. One of the thoughts for this thing was that I was going to play guitar and you were going to read over musical accompaniment, because I had heard that there wasn't a musical element to the audiobook. So we'll do that for a different. We'll do that for a different thing.
Should I go on to
Okay,
the next question?
go on to the next question. I'm going to find something to read. But yes, next question, please.
All right. So first, I just want to say I like the idea of Ian's books being the type of thing that you would marinate yams to, and you should use that as a book blurb. Next,
like that.
Cody Schwartz asks, since Quimby's is a Chicago area bookstore, and by the way, thank you for doing this event for us. Since Quimby's is a Chicago area bookstore, I'm wondering if both Ian and Matt can speak to their favorite Chicagoan cultural items, authors, bands, etc.
Oh, that's easy. I could Nelson Algren all the fucking way, all the way. I would say I went to school in Chicago because I like Nelson Algren. I'm just a huge fan. I think he's the best, and also a really underread writer in my opinion. Like he's a fun turn on. I'd say Nelson Algren's short stories. Ian, what do you got?
Gee, well, what do you mean, like
a Chicago writer or a Chicago book? I think was that the question? Sorry.
Chicago, right?
Chicago stuff, I guess. Chicago culture.
Chicago culture.
Sure,
Well,
why not?
You know, I don't know. Let me think about it. I like the guy. I like what do you think?
How about this?
Really
okay, well, Ian, I think you're gonna like this. Ian, Nelson Algren was such a badass that Simone de Beauvoir was sleeping with Simone de Beauvoir while her boyfriend was translating Nelson Algren.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Think about that.
Jean-Paul Sartre. That's a good book, Age of Reason by Jean-Paul Sartre. You should buy that.
There you go.
Or not, Nausea. That's a good book. He was a Gemini, and he's also one of my, he's a real hero. I would say Chicago. That's let me think. Chicago. Anyway, yeah. Let me think about it some more. We'll get back to that.
Okay.
I was born in Chicago, by the way.
Is that right? Why there?
In Saskatchewan.
What happened?
I don't know. The circus happened to be in town.
Did any of Steve Albini's writings make an impression on you as a youth?
I kind of missed the period when he was the firebrand writer who was getting everybody's panties in a knot. But
well, here's something interesting, real quick. His short stories are very different than his essay writing, and he writes really wonderful 2-page short stories that have a heavy vulnerability and emotional element to them. They're really good, and and I know this because me and Will Oldham, sometime within the last year, did a gig where we played with Steve in Louisville, and he just read his short stories, and they were lovely. They're not firebrandy, not trying to bum anybody out, just really like kind of classic American short story. So, and this is a public request to have Steve Albini publish some of these things because he's kind of shy about them.
Oh wow! Well, I love Steve, and I just had the pleasure of interviewing him along with Jerry Casale from Devo.
From Devo.
From Devo, exactly, and Jerry Casale actually told me that he was dating Tony Basil during when Devo was in their heyday.
Wow.
And I just learned that Tony Basil has recently been romantically linked to the dancer Spaz Attack, who's the Satisfaction video where the guy like flips on his back.
No, his name is Spaz Attacks.
Yeah, his name's Spaz Attack, and he's like an original LA punker. And anyway, Tony Basil has been romantic. I don't know what the truth to the rumor is, but Tony Basil.
Oh, the guy who does the move, the flip in the Devo video.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
So anyway, he's isn't that cool? So
yes.
Jerry, she went out with Jerry from Devo. I mean, obviously Tony doesn't. I'm not saying that Tony is just somebody who dates people. She's obviously one of the greatest cultural. I mean, she's one more heroes along with Castro. But
Yes.
but anyway, she's apparently romantically linked to Spaz Attack, which is pretty cool.
That's pretty fucking cool. I'm still not letting off the hook about Chicago, but let's go for the third question.
Okay.
I just want to have a good answer. You know?
I know.
Well, everybody can log back on when you sit up at 4 a.m. and you're like, oh, I should have said da da da. We'll just log back on. All right. So Gilmore Tamney asks, my question is, and it is a fairly frivolous one, was when did Mr. Svenonius's acumen and interest of the socioeconomic political emerge, i.e. infancy, extreme youth, early youth, and is there anything in particular, like a TV commercial, pizza day, cafeteria type of bike, that brought it about?
Wow. Well, that's interesting. That's a good question. I don't know, really. Honestly, I have no idea. I don't know. You know, I am from Washington, D.C., so maybe it's just, I don't know. Maybe it's just, you know, you know, that's a good question. I don't know. You know, I don't know. I think I know. I don't know.
Was it the Futurists? What was it? I mean, you were a fairly young man when you read the Italian Futurists, and it seemed like they made quite the impression.
That would be good. That's a good thing to recommend to people. Tommaso Marinetti. I don't know, but you know, probably just rock and roll, and you know, rock and roll has always had a cosmic outlook, and it's always trying to, it's always been, it's simultaneously a covert tool of imperialism, and it's also the kind of like only hope that the disenfranchised have. So it's a really paradoxical thing, and from my earliest memory, I just wanted, I just was into rock and roll, and I think rock and roll's always had, if you ever notice, rock and rollers are always dressing up like Nazis, and they're waving the communist flag, and it's always been very social political. So I think it just wound into the DNA of rock and roll as this kind of thing. It's got a global perspective. They didn't call it the British invasion for nothing.
Have you ever explored Paul Revere and the Raiders' trip about how they were holding it down for America during the British invasion in the 60s? Have you ever gotten into that whole headspace? It's pretty awesome.
I think a lot of people were, feeling that, like Bobby Fuller, and all these people.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of like resentment about the British, coming in and taking over, but people just have to, like that's, when the British came in, they were, they could see things from, when you're an outsider, you can see things more clearly. So in a sense, it's like, that's why the Soviet Union's critique of American culture actually really resonates, because they're outsiders and they have no, and like your Cuban friend, who, they can say something very incisive. So in a sense, like British people appropriating rock and roll, well, they were able to kind of, and they don't have the same hang-ups about, race and stuff that Americans have and did, So, but
this is just on a freewheeling note. I would say one of the most exciting things, and this is always in the back of my mind, is Western African guitar players, particularly Tuareg guitar players, like say Tanarwin or Mdu Mokhtar, and the absolutely fascinating double reverse take that they have on, like, Malian music seems to be on some core level where blues came from, but then now it's being shot back via crappy rock and roll. Dire Straits is the hugest band in Africa for some reason. These amazing Tuareg guitar players think that is the shit just because of sort of random distribution or however it happened. Then they were able to turn that into something utterly cosmic and utterly incredible that is directly related to rock and roll. and it's something I think about all the time. There's really all I can say is that I would be interested in talking to you further about the relationship between how rock and roll currently has jumped to Africa and how it's jumping back, and particularly the idea of a black man playing guitar, you know, like a weaponized guitar is in full effect right now with the music of, and has been for a long time now with the music of Tenor and say Songhai Blues even, or back to Mdu Mokhtar. So there still are like when we're talking about like kind of like a rock and roll perspective, I think for what it's worth, it's really fascinating right now seeing those groups and thinking about rock and roll in that context.
And in another, you know, and similar, I mean, on another kind of, you know, like it's like Hendrix, who played with the Isleys and Little Richard, and then going to England and, you know, being Bob Dylan and then coming back to Monterey and really blowing everybody's minds because he took the lessons of, or, you know, essentially is, you know, playing, you know, he's doing Little Richard in a kind of, you know, folk rock context, and it's like, well, so yeah, that's kind of, it's on some level, it's a similar thing, which is why that's why the ideas about, you know, I mean, we could talk forever about it, but, you know, these ideas like this thing with, you know, Robin Thicke, you know, this idea of appropriation is it's a very, you know, it's a weird idea.
It's an endless one, and you write beautifully about the English appropriation of rock and roll, and because I too have a sort of a love and fascination with how weird it all is, and I've always wondered about why isn't it the English accent and sort of vocal tone is so great for rock and roll music. It's so weird, you know what I mean? But it's the sound that only English people can get, you know, it seems to me, a certain British rock sound, you know?
Well, I think that the American accent is kind of some it's like German accent, essentially. And that they, you know, so we're like this, we have this monotone, and that's why,
right.
Those countries, you know, they have a much wider range in glottal.
Well, it's a different range because it also depends. Like, but then if you talk about the Midlands accent, it is the most monotone. They seem to speak in order not to be heard. It's a really wild. It's like a covert way of speaking. But then they also tend to be great singers, as if they aren't repressed when they're singing. You know, and that's the one chance that they get to put everything in, and then they do not want to ever show that emotion in any other context, in any speaking context. You know, yeah, it's wild.
Ozzy.
Oh well, that's the or Barney from Napalm Death,
and then yeah. Anyway.
Okay.
Swell Napster in Berlin. Right?
Such a great band.
Okay, next question.
All right, next question.
Okay. All right. So you guys had time for 2 more questions? How's that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. So this one is from Nat R, who asks, question, Ian, any interest in doing another TV show like Soft Focus or a podcast? The Marxist streaming service Means TV would probably love to have your political/cultural input.
Wow, well, that sounds great. Either one of those would be great. You know, it's but you know, I'm really lazy. That's one thing about me is I'm lazy and I'm not very what's the term? Dependable. I'm very undependable, and I'm lazy. But I would love to do both those things theoretically.
Next question.
Okay, so how about we'll make this our last question?
Sure.
So this is from Clint Williams, who says, can we get an update on Super Wolf 2?
Yeah, it'll be out soon. It will be out soon. But Ian's got to hear it first. And
It's gonna go to over.
also, I want to give a shout out because Gilmore, who asked that question about your teenage political awakening, is I just want to give a shout out to her because she was in a great band called the Yips, who were on Siltrees Records. Check out the Yips sometime, Ian. They were so cool. Gilmore's really cool.
Hey, I'm ready to answer my Chicago
Oh, you got it?
question. I want to acknowledge Drag City, who did the first pressing of the Psychic Soviet, which is this historic book. They were the only ones with the guts and with the vision to put out the book. And Drag City Records and books that's my favorite Chicago cultural.
You know what? I would say mine too. I would say that the Drag City label and ethos could only have happened in the city of Chicago, and I'm so grateful for it. I'm really, really grateful. My life would suck without it. So.
Yes.
Well, geez, I would just really like to sit here and read this whole book to everybody online, but in the meantime, I want to read one last little thing, which is if I had a gun to my head, I would tell everybody that you must read Rock and Religion. It has so many great points. And I'm going to have JR just read a couple of things, and that's how I'm going to leave. And here comes JR. Okay. Here we go.
Hello.
All right, let's have a round of applause for JR out there.
Because rock never announced itself as a religion, the cults coexisted and actually still do. The ideologies, however, are so antagonistic that the facade of fraternity is difficult to maintain. Despite their mutual hatred, there are uncanny similarities. Both cults are evangelical, tirelessly attempting to convert and then retain new believers, without whose monetary contributions each dogma could not sustain its power. The individual vessels of indoctrination, whether priests or group band members, are disposable and give their lives to serve the faith ideology itself. These people's missionary work, in rock parlance, touring, aims to bring the entire earth under its yoke, with an institutionalized intolerance for other religious musical forms. Both are concerned with pedophilia, with the churches being an outgrowth of a repressed sexuality and cyclical abuse, and rock and roll being part of the capitalistic worship of newness. Rock songs are rife with lyrical references to very young girls as objects of desire. Sweet Little 16, Only 16, Stray Cat Blues, Jailbait, She's Just 15, etc. While Christians idolize the virginal hymen and therefore focus on deflowering boys, rockers are not so preoccupied, exalting little girls who are bad or sluts, aka voracious consumers. Like the priest with his God, the rock group sermonizes about the eternal greatness of rock and roll as singular faith and ideology. Songs declare that rock and roll can never die, and long live rock and roll over Beethoven, and rock and roll music express a hateful and colonial attitude toward other music forms that don't have the same commercial components. In this feral sermon, the electric priest dispenses his version of this nasty faith rock and roll as life-giving, soul-saving doctrine.
Thank you.
Thank you, JR. And Ian, thanks so much for writing this book and for getting it out there. And thanks to Quimby's. You go.
Thank you so much. Everybody check out Super Wolf 2 and check out wait, what was the record you just have a new record that just came out, a record that you're involved in, you produced?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Oh, me and Will have we're almost done with the Super Wolf record with the new one. It's really good. I'm psyched.
Fantastic. That is great.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you, Quimby's. And I think you can get Super Wolf 2 or Super Wolf 1 through Quimby's, right?
Yes, you can buy. Yes, and Quimby's is Quimby's a drag city. I think right at this moment we'll give you 10 free copies if you act now.
Quimby and Drag City have gone into, they have a kind of, what's it called? Synergistic.
Yes, sinners. Yes.
Yeah, that's cool. That's great. It's important for all companies to cluster together.
Yes.
One unibrow.
Well, this was great. Thanks.
Okay,
well, I love you,
thanks,
Ian.
everybody. I'm going to sign off.
I miss you terribly.
Yeah, I love you too. Bye.
All right.
Thank
See ya.
You.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. See you.
Well, thank you so much, everybody. I'm going to post links in the chat for the books, and I'm so glad that everybody was here. If I can figure out the recording situation, once I get it downloaded, I'll post it somewhere.
Dope. That's great. Thank you. Feel free to edit and make it sexy. Thank you.
I will certainly try.
Okay.
All
See you
right.
later.
Take care, everybody.
Oh, what's that? Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
How do I leave? All right. How do I leave meeting?
Lower right corner.
That one. Right? Did I do
Yep.
it?
You're doing
I
it.
did it. Yay. And now.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Really appreciate it. And go to quimbys.com to get the books. Or we're also open Thursdays through Mondays, 12 to 6. Take care. Bye.